Welcome to Experiments in Africa, the podcast where we dive into groundbreaking experiments and innovations shaping the continent's future. I'm your host, Muller, and today we're exploring a fascinating experiment from rural Kenya that's shaping how we think about cash transfers, their ripple effects on local economies, and the big theories behind them. This is about real money, real people, and some surprising economic outcomes. So let's get started. Imagine dropping $1,000 into the hands of thousands of poor households in rural Kenya. That's exactly what a team of economists did in a massive experiment, and the results are nothing short of eye-opening. Published in Econometrica in 2022, the study titled General Equilibrium Effects of Cash Transfers. Experimental evidence from Kenya was led by researchers like Dennis Egger, Johannes Haushofer, Edward Miguel, Paul Niehaus, and Michael Walker. They partnered with Give Directly, an NGO that specializes in unconditional cash transfers, to see what happens when you inject a significant amount of money, about 15% of local GDP, into the hands of over 10,500 poor households across 653 villages in Siaya County, Kenya. The goal? To understand not just how cash helps recipients, but how it transforms entire local economies through what economists call general equilibrium effects. The ripples that spread to everyone, even those who didn't get a dime. So what's the big question here? Well, it's not just about whether cash helps the people who get it. That's been studied before, and we know cash transfers can boost things like consumption, food security, and even psychological well-being for recipients. The real game changer in this study is its focus on general equilibrium effects. That's a fancy way of saying how the cash impacts everyone in the community, not just those who got the money, and how it affects the broader economy. Think of it like dropping a pebble in a pond and watching the ripples spread. Let's set the scene. Siaya County is a rural area near Lake Victoria, home to the Luo people, with a population density much higher than Kenya's average. Most folks here are farmers, living in homes with thatched roofs, which was the simple criterion Give Directly used to identify eligible households. About 1/3 of the 65,000 households in the study area qualified, and each got around $1,000 in nominal terms, or about $1,871 in purchasing power parity, delivered via mobile money through M-Pesa. That's a huge sum, equivalent to 75% of a household's annual spending. The researchers didn't just hand out cash and call it a day. They designed a sophisticated experiment, randomizing not only which villages got the transfers, but also the intensity of the transfers across larger geographic areas called sublocations. Some areas had 2/3 of villages treated, others just 1/3. This allowed them to track how money flows through a community, affecting everyone from shopkeepers to farmers to people who didn't get a single shilling. Before we unpack the results, let's ground this in some big-picture economic theories that explain why cash transfers matter and what they might do to an economy, especially when it comes to inflation. First up is Keynesian economics, inspired by John Maynard Keynes' work in the 1930s. Keynes argued that in economies with underutilized resources, like idle workers or businesses operating below capacity, injecting money, like cash transfers, can boost demand without necessarily causing inflation. The idea is that businesses can ramp up production to meet new demand using existing resources, leading to real economic growth rather than just price hikes. This study tests that theory in a rural setting, where slack in the economy, like shops or mills waiting for customers, might amplify the impact of cash. Another key theory is the quantity theory of money, which suggests that increasing the money supply, like through cash transfers, could lead to inflation if the economy is already at full capacity. If everyone's spending more, but there's no extra goods or services to buy, prices go up. In rural Kenya, where markets are less integrated and production is often local, this theory predicts inflation might hit hard, unless, of course, there's enough unused capacity to absorb the extra demand. Then there's the development economics lens, particularly by Arthur Lewis' 1954 theory of surplus labor. Lewis argued that in developing economies, there's often slack in the form of underemployed labor or idle resources. Cash transfers could activate the slack, boosting output without pushing prices up, as businesses and workers respond to new demand. This study puts that idea to the test, asking whether rural Kenya's economy has the flexibility to expand when cash flows in. Finally, we have monetary policy and currency union dynamics, as outlined by economists like Emmanuel Farai and IVN Werning. Kenya's rural economies operate within a currency union, meaning local cash injections don't trigger national monetary policy changes, like interest rate hikes. This could make cash transfers more potent locally, as the money stays in the community rather than being offset by broader economic adjustments. But it also raises questions about whether local price inflation could still occur if demand outstrips supply. So, what did the study find, and what happened? First, the direct effects. Households receiving the cash saw big jumps in consumption, like buying more food and clothes, and investing in durable assets like livestock or better roofing. No surprise there. These findings align with Keynesian predictions. Give people money, and they'll spend it, boosting demand. But the real surprise came from the spillovers. But here's where it gets interesting. Non-recipient households, the ones who didn't get the cash, also saw their consumption jump by 13% after 18 months. That's huge. It's not like they were dipping into savings either. Their income went up, especially from wage labor, because local businesses were booming. Speaking of businesses, local firms, think small shops, grain mills, or welding businesses, saw their revenues climb significantly. And this wasn't just because recipients were spending their cash. The study found that the economic boost was driven by the overall intensity of cash transfers in nearby areas, not just whether a specific village got the money. This supports the idea of a tightly knit rural economy where money circulates fast, creating a rising tide that lifts both recipients and non-recipients. It's a classic Keynesian multiplier effect, where initial spending sparks more spending, amplifying economic activity. Now let's talk inflation, because this is where the theories really come into play. The quantity theory of money would predict price spikes if the cash influx overwhelmed local supply. One worry with cash transfers is inflation. If everyone's suddenly spending more, won't prices skyrocket? Remarkably, the study found almost no price inflation, less than 1% on average across a wide range of goods, from maize to soap to iron sheets during peak transfer period. This is a big deal because it means the economic gains were real, not just nominal increases, wiped out by higher prices. The researchers dug into this by collecting monthly price data from 61 local markets, covering everything from food to hardware. Even during the peak transfer period, price hikes stayed minimal. This is a big win for the Keynesian and Lewisian views. The local economy had enough slack, idle shops, underused mills, workers waiting for customers, to absorb the demand shock without prices skyrocketing. It suggests that rural Kenya's economy was operating below capacity, just as Lewis' surplus labor theory might predict. How do you measure the overall impact of this cash injection? The researchers calculated something called the local transfer multiplier. This is a number that tells you how much extra economic activity, think spending or income, is generated for every dollar transferred. Their estimate, a multiplier of about 2.5. That means every dollar handed out generated $2.50 in local economic activity. To put that in perspective, that's higher than many fiscal multiplier estimates from the US, where government spending often yields $1.50 to $2. And they got this number two ways. One by looking at spending data, expenditure-based, the other by looking at income data, like wages and profits, and both estimates aligned, which is a strong sign of robustness. Why? The currency union setting, as far-right and warning suggest, likely helped. The cash stayed local, unhindered by national monetary tightening, and the rural economy's hand-to-mouth consumers, people who spend what they get, amplified the effect, as Keynes would have predicted. Host. So how did the economy handle this cash surge? The study points to slack in the system, especially in retail and manufacturing. Think of a grain mill sitting idle half the day, or a shopkeeper waiting for customers. When cash transfers hit, people bought more, and these businesses ramped up without needing new workers or equipment. This on-demand nature of many local businesses, like shops or welders, who only work when customers show up, helps explain why the economy could absorb such a big shock without prices spiking. This aligns with Lewis' idea of surplus capacity in developing economies. The average non-agricultural business saw just 1.9 customers per hour, suggesting plenty of room to grow without hitting supply limits. But it's not all perfect. The study found that while the cash transfers didn't increase overall inequality, there was a slight uptick in asset inequality in some areas, possibly because wealthier non-recipients benefited a lot from the economic spillover. If people care about relative status, this could spark tension, though no negative effects like crime or domestic violence were found. This raises questions about distributional impacts, which neither Keynes nor Lewis fully address, but are critical for understanding welfare. What's the big takeaway? This experiment shows that cash transfers don't just help the people who get them, they can transform entire communities. The spillovers to non-recipients and local businesses are huge, and the lack of inflation means these gains are sustainable, at least in the short term. The spillovers to non-recipients and businesses are massive, and the lack of inflation supports Keynesian and Lewisian theories that economies with slack can grow without price spikes. The currency union setting amplified the effect, as Farhi and Werning's work suggests, while the quantity theory's inflation fears didn't materialize here. This challenges critics who see cash transfers as mere handouts, showing they can drive real economic growth. It's a powerful counter-argument to critics who say cash transfers are a handout with no lasting impact. And it's a reminder that randomized controlled trials, often criticized for focusing on small questions, can tackle big economic ideas like multipliers when designed with ambition. Looking ahead, the researchers wonder about long-term effects. Could cash spark lasting changes, like better businesses or new social networks, as theories of economic geography or increasing returns suggest? Or will the economy revert to its old state, as standard open economy models predict? That's a question for future studies, and I'm excited to see where this leads. Before we wrap up, a quick shout out to the team behind this study and Give Directly for pulling off such a massive experiment. It's a shining example of how rigorous science can tackle big questions, proving randomized controlled trials can go beyond small-scale studies to address macroeconomic ideas. It's also testament to the power of collaboration between researchers, NGOs, and local communities. If you want to dive deeper, check out the full paper in Econometrica for more on innovative experiments like this one. That's it for today's episode of Africa Innovate. If you love this dive into cash transfers and economic theory, subscribe, leave a review, and tell us what African experiments you want us to cover next. Until then, keep innovating, and we'll catch you in the next episode.